SABC News presentation.
A very good evening to you. A warm welcome to Interface here on SABC3. My name is Samachele. Thank you very much for making the time to join us. Well, extensive changes to South Africa's immigration laws have been met with fierce criticism. Critics say these changes are unconstitutional. They will open the department up for litigation, hinder the import of scarce skills, and will negatively affect current and potential foreign investment into South Africa. Now, our guests tonight to discuss this are Jackie McKay, who is the Deputy Director General for Immigration Services at the Department of Home Affairs. Dr. Aurelia Sagati is an Associate Professor at the African Center for Migration and Society in the Humanities Department at the University of the Witwatersrand. And Gershon Mosiane is the CEO at Mosiane Group of Companies. Now remember that if you would like to discuss or join us in any way, you can always send us your text on Facebook. It's Interface on SABC3, or you can find us on Twitter at Samachele or at Interface on SABC. Welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for
DDG, let's start with you, and maybe you can just outline for us, what do the new regulations say in a nutshell?
Well, it's difficult to put it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
I think we should, because we are going to debate an issue here that is rather extensive and cannot be put into a nutshell, because we'll really have to broaden, and people need to understand, firstly, the rationale for why we had
But before we
changed
get to the rationale, what are the actual changes that have been proposed or implemented?
The changes are quite a few. I will give it to you. Firstly, we are now saying that people that apply, we issued what we call corporate permits.
Yes.
Or not intra-company permits in the past for a period of 2 years. They will now be issued for a period of 4 years.
And those are permits that say what?
Those are visas that say that if you are working for a particular company, like let's say you are working for BMW and you are based in Germany, in Munich, you can now be transferred to a subsidiary in South Africa of BMW and work for a period and work for that company here. Now, in the past, it was for a period of 2 years. And we had a lot of complaints from companies stating that it's too onerous for their workers to continuously, every 2 years, have to apply for extensions of these permits. We looked into the matter, and we agreed to extend it for a period of 4 years. Mm-hmm. So they would now be in the country for a period of 4 years.
Okay, that's the one.
The second one is that we also brought into line our Immigration Act with that of the Children's Act, as well as the Act on the Trafficking in Persons. We now require that all children should have a passport when traveling. As you know, this is also Children's Week, and it's important that we are able to make sure that the children that come into our country and those leaving our country we can account for. And we also need to know with whom they are traveling. So there is also a requirement that these children, that if they are traveling with their parents, they would need to have an unabridged birth certificate to show that these are indeed their parents, and there is a need for an affidavit from the parents if the child is traveling with non-parents or with one of the parents. Right. So that is the one. The other very important one is the restriction on the change of status for certain types of permits. And it's actually just whilst you are in the country. And those are just two types of permits. The one permit is a visitor's permit. We are saying that if you enter the country as a tourist, you cannot come and change the condition, change the status of your permit whilst in the country. You cannot come to South Africa on holiday, look for a job, find a job, and now apply for a work permit, for instance, whilst you are in South Africa, or any other type of permit that we have.
And if
The
you
law
are in
now,
South Africa and you fall in love with somebody and decide to get married, how does that affect you?
you would have, if you fall in love whilst you are here on a 2-week holiday, I'm sure you have
It
to go back.
happens.
It does happen, indeed, it does happen. But you would have to go back to your country and you would have to apply for a necessary permit to come. Either you would have to apply again to come in, get married to that person, and then apply for the appropriate permit.
All right, let's bring in
that they
Kishon
need to
Musiane, who is
apply
the
for.
CEO of the Musiane Group of Companies. These sound very reasonable. What are your issues with
Tembisa, firstly, let me
regulations?
correct something. I'm not here as the CEO of Musiane Group of Companies. I'm here as the national chairperson of FIPSA, which is the Forum for Immigration Practitioners of South Africa.
Which is not recognized by the department anymore.
It is recognized to some extent. We are engaging the department to try and register with SAQA and try and bring our profession into self-regulation. But that is not the issue on hand.
Okay, what is your issue with the regulations?
The issue on hand, firstly, is the repealing of Section 46. And obviously, if you are not happy with something, that does not mean that you cannot sit on the negotiation table. We are not happy that Section 46 has been repealed.
Which says what?
Which says that, basically Section 46 says only a registered immigration practitioner, an attorney or an advocate can represent a person in immigration processes. When you repeal that section, you are saying any person can assist somebody in immigration processes. Our submission is that that is a violation of our constitutional right in terms of Section 22 of the Constitution, in that we have a right to choose a profession. Government has a right to regulate a profession, and they cannot overnight abdicate that right. That is one issue. The other issue, before getting to the different categories of permits as outlined in the regulations, is the issue of timing. The Act was passed in 2011. For 4 years, we have not had anything. The first time we heard about the regulations was in February, when we were given 2 weeks to submit our public comments. We asked for an extension, we were given an extra 1 week. As FIPSA, we engaged counsel to assist us with drafting our public comments, which we duly submitted to the department, and it was acknowledged.
Okay, we're going to get the DDG to just respond on the timing issue, but Dr. Sigati, I would like to bring you in here. Is this solution, so the regulations that have been put forward, are they addressing the real problem, which I would imagine is the influx of illegal immigrants per se, in one of the aspects that the DDG outlined? Are we addressing that correctly with these regulations, or should we be looking for other solutions?
Well, clearly not. And what's quite interesting is that it wasn't the intention. One key problem which was raised by the previous speaker is that these regulations are coming into effect to actually implement amendments to the immigration legislation which were passed in 2007 and 2011. So we are talking here of the implementation of regulations which are coming into effect 7 years and 4 years after a piece of legislation was passed in Parliament, which in itself I think is problematic and speaks poorly to the ability of the department to implement its own legislation. But coming to your question, I think it's quite clear that precisely it's not addressing the core issue of access to the South African labour market for essentially the low-skilled in this region. It was not the intention, so one cannot blame the department for not doing this. But on the other hand, I'd like to remind everybody of the fact that Minister Panda announced last year in her budgetary speech at the beginning of 2013 that work seekers permits for people in the region would be designed, issued, that there was some thinking in the department around that aspect, which is really needed. And that doesn't seem to be happening.
All right, we're going to get some answers from the DDG, but we have to take a short break now. And remember, if you would like to get in touch with us, we can be found on Facebook and on Twitter. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are talking immigration issues and we are taking your thoughts on Facebook. We are getting those messages coming through thick and fast, so do keep them coming. And also on Twitter at Tembisa Magele or at Interface on SABC. And we are in conversation with Jackie McKay, who is the DDG for Immigration Services at Home Affairs, and also Gershon Mosiane, who is with FIPSA, and Dr. Aurelia Sagati from WIRTS. And before the break, we were talking about timing. Gershon, you wanted to finish the point about why you say that the timing was not correct.
As I was mentioning, Tembisa, after we were given an opportunity to submit public comments, it was only on the 22nd in the afternoon that we got knowledge that the final regulations have been gazetted and the implementation date is the 26th, which is actually 1 working day plus 2 weekend days. Now, how can you implement regulations within that short space of time, knowing very well that to prepare an application for an immigration permit, it takes at least minimum 2 months?
Okay, let's get the DDG to respond. Was there proper consultation on this?
Indeed. I think we've got to start, like I said, this is a complex issue which cannot be put in a nutshell. We've got to start 2007 and 2011. Immigration regulations are linked to acts. These acts of 2007 and the act of, and the further amendment in 2011 was passed by Parliament. So the whole parliamentary process took place. The issue of Section 46, as raised by Mr. Moshiani, that has been written out of the Act, was a decision taken at a parliamentary level. So during, as you know, when Parliament, when acts go through Parliament, there's a public participation period for that. There are presentations to the portfolio committees on these matters. All of those processes were followed. All of those processes.
But fast forward to 2014, he's saying it's only in February that there was a call for comments.
Now we are talking about the regulations. Now let's be clear about the regulations. The Act says, the Immigration Act says, that the minister can publish regulations after consultation or in consultation with the Immigration Advisory Board. And that was done. That consultation was done with the Immigration Advisory Board. Immigration Advisory Board consists of the Department of Home Affairs, it consists of other government departments, it consists of departments outside of government. Like, for instance, we have one gentleman that's working with Dr. Aurelia, that's also sitting on the board. So it's not,
the board,
it's NGO, non-government.
What about the rest of your stakeholders? Did you consult them properly?
Ma'am, if you could just give me a chance, because
we are running out of time, so you need to get to that answer.
Yes. I am saying that on that board, the Immigration Advisory Board, we have all of those stakeholders represented. And those consultations took place. Now, the law does not allow us, or the law does not say consult the public generally. That's not what the law says. But our minister, previous minister, Minister Pando, went a further step and said, no, publish the regulations for public comment, which we did. We published it. Now, there could always be an argument in terms of how much time they had to respond to that. We even took that into consideration. When they raised the issue with us, saying that the time is too short, she then gave them a further week to respond to that. So it should be clear that we feel as a department that public consultation was done and in the correct manner.
What about the issue, Dr. Sagati, that these regulations actually infringe on the rights of the immigrants or the migrants that are coming to work in South Africa, because all of a sudden now they have to work extra hard to try and prove that they're here to work or to try and make sure that they get their work permits. They have to go the extra mile, and they might as well just say, you know what, we're going to take our skills elsewhere.
Well, precisely that's one of the risks that has been raised by a number of commentators. But just to come back briefly on the consultation process, I think it's important to say that, yes, the consultation process has been followed, but it doesn't mean that it has been taken into account by the department. And one has to know that the appointment of the Immigration Advisory Board is done at the discretion of the minister. It is by no means representative of all stakeholders in the area. And the consultations that took place within the Immigration Advisory Board have been conducted in a very secretive manner by the department. So I think that had to be stated before coming to your point. We have to wait, actually, because we can't anticipate on the litigation cases which are actually currently already being prepared. The department had actually been warned during consultation, during submissions to Parliament, that there was a risk of going towards litigation cases precisely because of the unconstitutionality of certain of the aspects, particularly the fact that people can be declared undesirable if they leave the country pending an application, especially in the case of spouses of South Africans or parents of South African children. We'll see. I cannot anticipate on the decisions that will be taken by courts, but it's quite likely that the department will once again face a great number of litigation cases.
We're going to get the DDG to respond on that, but isn't it best practice? Isn't it what's done in other countries where if you leave without a valid permit or a valid visa, you will not be found desirable in that country when you come back? Isn't that standard practice?
It is standard practice, but it's again in the manner in which it is implemented. And what is not standard practice is to declare undesirable categories of citizens who are linked to South African citizens by marriage or by filiation as parents. That is not standard.
No, I think we need to be clear here. There are two issues that have been raised there. These are not categories of citizens. We are talking about the Immigration Act deals with foreigners coming into South Africa. And what we have done is indeed what we, the Act or the regulations try to deal with an abuse of the immigration system or the Immigration Act that we had before. One of them was that people would come into the country and stay for long periods of time. In fact, there would be those that enter that do not require visas to come into South Africa, enter South Africa and virtually stay here for long periods of time. They would enter South Africa, and when their 3 months expire, they would simply go to a neighboring country and come back and be given a further 90 days to stay in the country. And when that 90 days comes to an end, they would leave and go to Swaziland and come back and be given a further. So there was a complete abuse of that. And when they would be found out, they would merely pay a fine of 1,000 rand, between 1,000 and 3,000 rand. We feel as a department that that was not a deterrent enough for people to break our immigration law and stay for longer periods.
We have to take a short break. Sean, I would like to get some solutions from you when we come back, and also from you if you would like to give us your thoughts, Facebook and also on Twitter. Stay with us. So just some of the thoughts coming through on Facebook, also indicative of just how much debate and discussion is going on around this issue. Let's take a few of them. Gabriel Chisango says, how can a person leave their job and go back to apply for a permit? Will the employer wait? And Kalango Mtondo Lovani, that's a little long, but I hope I've got it correct, says, it's a good enforcement to control the influx of foreigners. I salute Home Affairs for a splendid job well done. Murifi says, South African immigration must tighten its security because of the unemployment rate. We have too many economic refugees. And Bangi Dukia says, the day will come for South Africans abroad. So that just is a hint to say that we will also be treated the same way. And I take it that he disapproves of what the department is doing. But just getting back to some of your thoughts then, Gershon, you've raised the issue of investment. I was reading somewhere where you say that this will have a negative impact on the investment coming into this country. How so?
Before I get to that, Tembisa, very quickly, what the doctor has raised in terms of declaring persons as undesirable, what the department forgets is that Directive 9 actually instructs the immigration officers at ports of entry to implement it without discretion. That is the instruction from Mr. McKay sitting with us here. But what he forgets is that the section 27 says may, which means it gives the person who's faced with the situation to apply his mind. But how it is applied here, it's applied in such a way to say that if you have overstayed, you are automatically undesirable, and therefore you are guilty until you prove yourself you are innocent. That is a problem in terms of our laws.
Okay, I hope you're noting that, DDG.
Then getting to the issue of investment, let's take a hypothetical situation. If you are on a business permit now with the previous regulations, you want to move to permanent residence, you cannot, because of you have to firstly comply with the requirements of the new regulations. The requirements of the new regulations are problematic in a sense that the amounts have not been gazetted. You then have, as an existing business, have to restructure your whole staff structure in that you have to have 60% of your staff complement to be South Africans. Now, you have to fire those that you have and employ South Africans. Now, which businessman, reasonable businessman, can do that overnight, taking into consideration the labor unrest in our country?
All right, that's a fair concern.
And again, the same applies to a person sitting in another country, coming to invest what we hear as rumors that the minimum investment amount would be 5 million. If you are going to invest 5 million, you must employ the staff complement of 60% should be South Africans. Then you have to do that within the first 12 months. That is problematic.
Okay, let's leave it there. Let's get your responses, DDG.
Thank you very much. Firstly, our laws, South African laws, are not applied retrospectively. I think that's important. It's an important issue that we need to take into account. Meaning that if there are businesses in South Africa that applied according to the old law and the old regulations, the new regulations do not apply to them. That's the one point. So if we are now talking about moving forward with the new regulations, these are the requirements that any new investor would need to comply with before coming into the country.
And the staff issue?
The staff issue is important. We have in South Africa a situation where we have joblessness, and we have people we believe that are suitably qualified to do certain jobs. And it is in our national interest that we create employment. And it is also in our national interest to be able to invite companies to South Africa that would be able to grant jobs to South Africans as well. In the past, the requirement was you come into South Africa as a businessman and open a business, and in your company you can only employ, or you are allowed to employ 5 South Africans. Now that in itself was not correct.
But are you expecting them to do it overnight, where they now have to all of a sudden have 60% South Africans?
Now listen to me, please. As I said, it is not our laws are not applied retrospectively. So if you have a company now that comes into or that was in South Africa that had 5 South Africans working for it, that law will not apply to them. The law will apply to a new company that comes in now and applies for it and says, we want to have a company in South Africa, and we now require, and we would now say the requirement for you to invest and run a business in South Africa is that you should at least employ 60% of your employees should be South Africans.
All right, we are running out of time, but we have to address this one. Is it my understanding, or is it correct to understand it in this way, that if you've been married to a South African and you're a foreigner, you have to wait 5 years before you apply for permanent citizenship?
Indeed, that is correct. That is to make sure that we do not have what we call fake marriages, where people just apply, come in, get married so that they could get a document or a permit to stay in South Africa legally. For instance, there are some nationals that come into our country, have fake marriages. Once they get permanent residence, divorce the South African spouse, and then invite and bring in their spouses from their home countries. Now that is clearly an abuse. Another issue that I would like to touch on, because it touched on issues of integrity of the Department of Home Affairs, is the issue that has been raised by Dr. Aurelia, saying that we actually appoint the Immigration Advisory Board secretively. I don't believe that is true. the Immigration Act allows and gives a rise to the establishment of the Immigration Advisory Board. And it is clear in the Act. It says that the board shall consist of the Director General of the Department of Home Affairs, the Head of Immigration Services, any representative from any government department or organ of state, a person representing organized business, a person representing organized labor, and up to 5 individual persons appointed by the minister in the prescribed manner on the basis of their knowledge, their experience, and their involvement pertaining to immigration law. So there is in no way that we do things undercover.
All right,
when
Dr.
we appoint
Dr. Sikati, let's bring you in here. The issue of being married for a certain period before you can get permanent citizenship, isn't that assuming that, you know, things don't go wrong in the first 2 years of any marriage, and if they do, then automatically you're trying to scam the state?
Well, the problem is that the Department of Home Affairs is constantly using anecdotal evidence. I'm not saying evidence that doesn't exist, but I'm saying evidence that is only about a very, very small proportion of the cases to justify a constant drift towards a security approach to migration, talking about foreigners abusing the system. And that is the problem that we have. We don't think it's very healthy for any government to legislate or regulate on the basis of exceptional cases, not taking into account the majority, the vast majority of cases. On the 5-year period, it is quite standard, but the problem is the constant reference to abuses in the system that I think is particularly unhealthy.
But isn't it a fact that we have those abuses and they are quite substantial in
We
South
have,
Africa?
they are not substantial.
Are they
They are
not?
in the minority, and I would like maybe Director McKay to give us figures about that. And we also have a lot of abuses by South African citizens of their own identity cards and passports, etc. Abuse is unfortunately a part of human nature. But the problem is its constant association with foreigners. It verges on you know, xenophobic discourse. And unfortunately, we already know that we have too much of this in South Africa.
All right, Gershon, way forward.
Way forward, as FIPSA, we wish the minister, the hierarchy of the department, to revisit some of these issues around the table and try and find an amicable solution. Because of as it stands now, the immigration regime is held at ransom. You cannot submit with old regulations. You cannot submit with new regulations. All regional offices have been shut down with notice on Friday afternoon. From yesterday, people have been turned away. The visa facilitation centers are not all of them open. Only 3 are open. The 3 that are open cannot take in applications.
All right,
It's problematic.
we've got to leave it there, but DDG, will you be revisiting this issue?
We definitely won't be. Firstly, our minister said, our current minister, Minister Malusi Gigaba, was clear when he said that regulations are not cast in stone, that they are always reviewed, and we are always looking at issues that impact on them and how to do things better. And if it means that we need to revisit some of these issues in a couple of years when we review these immigration regulations, we will take in account some of the issues that have been raised.
All right, and maybe then we can get an update also on whether or not you've based these regulations on minority cases, like Dr. Sikati was saying. But we've got to leave it there. Thank you so much, all 3 of you, for coming through to talk to us on this matter. And thank you so much for joining us for this program. Remember that we do keep all of your comments, and we do want to continue the conversation on our Facebook page and also on Twitter. Good night.